It's Thursday, October 4th, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On today's show, we dive into Shark Talk with the Cape Cod Chamber, meet another member of Ralph Bismore's family at Wings of Freedom, and learn more about herring runs and their significance to our ecosystems. Here's some news you can use. Since Coffee with a Cop's humble beginnings, there have been thousands of Coffee with a Cop events in all 50 states and 14 different countries in 4 languages. Coffee with a Cop is a grassroots as it gets. It brings people together to talk over coffee, or anything else you prefer, with no agenda and no speeches, just open and honest communication. The first Wednesday of October is deemed National Coffee with a Cop Day, and Channel 18 ventured out to Dunkin's in Marston's Mills yesterday to have a cup of joe with the Barnstable Police Department.
Wednesday was National Coffee with a Cop Day, and the Barnstable Police Department jumped behind the counter and served up coffee, donuts, and other treats at the Dunkin' Donuts in Marston's Mills. Chief Sana Ben took a turn behind the counter and quickly learned the ropes and served up the coffee hot, fresh, and with a smile.
Was the plan to get behind the counter?
Yeah, apparently I got here and that was the plan with National Coffee with a Cop Day. I didn't know, but it's a great experience. Actually take for granted how hard they work behind that counter, and you don't really realize how busy it really gets and how angry people get when they don't get their coffee right in the morning. So, but everything's been going great. People have been awesome. Kids have been coming in and giving them patches and pins and stuff, and it's been great. It's been awesome. A lot of iced coffee, but it's different, you know. It's nice. It's good at getting out here working with these guys, and they're doing a great job. It's fantastic how fast they do it, and it's awesome.
Sharks, technology, and marketing all entered the conversation with Cape Cod Chamber CEO and President Wendy Northcross. We discussed safety tips from the experts and more in our monthly phone chat. It was the summer of sharks on Cape Cod. With me on the phone, CEO and President of the Cape Cod Chamber, Wendy Northcross. Wendy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Didn't go in the water a lot this summer, but then again, I don't normally. I live by a pond, so that's my preferred, and there's really no sharks there or seals. But you've got some information. You've been part of some community conversations recently, so let's talk sharks.
Yes, let's talk sharks. I think that you are not alone in your preference for not going in the water, and that's just human nature. 77% of the people that go to the beach, whether it's salt or freshwater, never go in the water. I mean, they just lounge and read a book, I guess, but they just aren't there predominantly to go in the water. But I will say that after the summer that we've had with the shark-human interactions, people really need to be much more vigilant and paying attention to what we're learning about sharks and to their habits and to where they are, where they're not, and just, you know, be safe so that we can continue to have a robust tourism industry so we can not make people afraid. We just have been learning a lot from this summer. Even though the sharks have been here 10 years, when you start to have these actual interactions with humans, we do learn some things, and that's what we're here to share today.
Right, and you've had conversations with experts and community conversations as well. There was one down on the Lower Cape this past weekend. But let's start with the experts. Dr. Greg Skolmo has been studying these animals for several years here on the Cape. What are you learning from him?
Right, we are actually lucky. He's one of the world's preeminent great white shark experts now, just because he's taken a huge interest in it. He's had the resources from the state of Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife to do that. And what he told me recently, he said that, you know, what we've learned is that sharks can learn. We've also learned the seals can learn. So as more seals have returned because of the conservation measures, that's attracted more sharks. And now the seals are learning that the sharks are out there. So the seals are kind of hugging the shore, and they're not venturing out to play and swim and surf themselves. They're kind of hanging on shore, which has made the net effect of the sharks coming closer to shore. And what Dr. Skolmo says, like, they've learned that behavior. They have figured that out. He's also talking about the difference between an older shark and a younger shark. Older sharks use their nose, their scent, to find their prey. The younger sharks use sight. And so from that, we've learned a couple of things, too.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
I know, who knew?
There's always been this talk, if we're looking at, whether they're smelling you or seeing you, it's how far from shore you are. That's what this is, we've been hearing, but it's not necessarily how far, it's how deep.
That's what we're hearing now, and all of our advice heretofore that we've had on our website or in our guidebooks has been, if you go more than 300 feet away from the shore, you're going to be less safe. What Dr. Skolman was saying now, it appears that the sharks have adapted so well. They get in these troughs between the breaks where the surfers go, for example. He's saying don't get in the water above your waist. That if you're in waist-deep water, you'll be fine. That's not enough water for the shark to do its thing. But anything deeper than that, the shark is going to have enough space to adequately attack. And they also said that if the younger sharks can't see very well, if you go in water that's all churned up, you know how rough the surf is,
right,
especially on the outer cape. The water's really kind of cloudy and churned up. It's going to be hard for the shark to figure out if it's you or a seal. They prefer the seal, but if they can't tell the difference, they see something there, you could get confused. And so they said just stay out of the water if that's the case, too. So I think all of that's fascinating. I think that's kind of new information that people can take and hold and understand. And like I said, most people are heeding that. The National Park has told us that they actually pull more people out of the water from riptides and try to protect them from riptides than they do from shark interactions. The lifeguards will immediately signal that there's sharks in the water. People are out of the water. They're obeying the lifeguards. And that's good. That's kind of what we need, because we need to be able to continue to have people feel confident in Cape Cod as a destination. Even to live here, people want to know that they can go to the beach and enjoy the beach when they want to.
Right. Let's talk a little bit, the community conversation that was on the Lower Cape this past weekend really brought forth people with ideas. Like Cape Codders have ideas, right? Yeah. I mean, we're just a sandbar of ideas. We really are. But some of these ideas are really based in a lot of technology.
Well, that's the most amazing thing, because we have been getting, since the last two incidents, we've been getting regular communications from people, not out of concern, but with a suggestion. And I say thank you very much, and I add it to the list. But a lot of it's based on technology, and the technology has changed pretty dramatically in the 10 years since the sharks have returned. So now I'm hearing things like there are wetsuits that actually can repel sharks. They'll sense and repel sharks. So they're made of a material that the shark cannot penetrate. There's sonar buoys that can detect a shark over a different type of animal, ping it to an app, make an instant notification. Or there's drones, the drone technology, and that's been part of the conversation with the National Park, because they have banned drones, mostly for recreational purposes, but now they're rethinking that the drones might be a great replacement for very expensive spotter planes, because the best way to find the sharks is from the top down.
Right.
So I find all of that extremely exciting in a way, because it could spur some cottage industry here on the Cape. It could be a really smart way to kind of have your cake and eat it too,
Exactly. And let's just touch on some of the technology really for emergency services. So several years ago, Open Cape came through, and we have redundant service, but the Outer Cape still has spotty cell service.
Right. And
some of the comments over the past couple of weeks has been, well, if we had more robust service in the area, is there any work in an organization that might be looking at that?
So Open Cape immediately reached out to the National Park Service after the September 15th incident, and they said, there's a way to bolster cell phone service in the very remote reaches of the park area, and to do it in a way that's compatible with the community character. In other words, they don't need big cell cell phone towers. They can do it so it's not as obvious as that. And that seems to make a lot of sense. Now, there was some comment at the advisory council meeting of the park a week ago Monday saying, well, we really don't, it would be awful if people could just use their cell phones on the beach. Well, I think we need to rethink that. You know, I think that in this 21st century, a total global communications network is not necessarily a bad thing. And if people who understand how this technology works, for which I know you do, Paula, just the sheer number of people that are on Cape Cod in the summer, we have cell phone service drop just because the volume. Now, you know, our network's great, right, but if there's too many people on the Cape trying to get on their cells at the same time, you'll drop calls. Right. And I think that we have to look at that differently now. We have to make sure we have capacity for emergency response and emergency communications.
So I kind of want to end our conversation today because you have the yeoman's work in front of you. You have next season. You're already working on it. How are you going to market the Cape as a destination with this particular challenge, I guess we could call it?
It's a great word. That's something we're working on right now. I mean, we are revisiting everything. I mean, we're known for our world-class beaches, and that's still going to be a huge draw. But like I said, 77% of the people that go to the beach don't even get in the water. But think of everything else that we have to promote and talk about on Cape Cod. We have amazing culture. There's a lot of ways to be on the water without being in the water. You can enjoy it through boating and you know, fishing and whale watching and all these other things. So I think we're going to have to be really mindful, and it might be subtle. It might be subtle that people might not notice at first, but instead of people splashing around in waves or surfing, we'll probably be offering up different images of how to enjoy Cape Cod.
Well, that's a way to do it, and then perhaps maybe seal watches and shark watches.
There you go. Here you go. It is also an opportunity to strengthen our communications network, and we're talking about perhaps creating some kind of a logo or brand or graphic representation that we can share with everybody, and when people see it, they'll know it's about ocean safety. You know, put it in a positive light, because like I said, there's more than just sharks to be mindful of. There's riptides, or there could be jellyfish, or whatever. I mean, we're living in a real world with real critters in it. It's their home in the sea, and we need to continue to educate people as well. So that's what we'll be doing this winter.
Fantastic. Wendy, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Barnstable is home to many heroes and parks that are named after them. At the Wings of Freedom event at Barnstable Municipal Airport, Channel 18 had a chance to meet Joe Bismore, the youngest brother of Ralph Bismore, and learn more about the World War II hero and the park that was named for him on Ocean Street overlooking Hyannis Harbor.
Yes, he was on a B-26, like that one, only with just a single tail. And I have heard several different stories of how he died. I don't know which is actually the way he died, but it doesn't make any difference. He died in the plane. And I have been once down to the cemetery in Washington and visited his gravesite, and that was really an emotional experience. But he was really a saint. He was a remarkable, amazing, lovely person, and as opposed to some of the rest of us who were gruff and not so nice. We'd get a letter once in a while, because that's about all the communications we had. The telephones were all busy with war business. And so occasionally we'd get a letter, and we, my mother and my sisters, would send him a package with some cookies and stuff in it. I don't know if they ever got there or not. or if they did get there, they were probably gulped up by all of his friends, like it was when I was in the Army. I'd get a package and I'd have 2 cookies and the rest of them would just go to everybody else. But no, we didn't have much constant awareness of where he was, which is good because, but anyway, like when he went over to Europe, I had no idea he was in Europe until we discovered that he was no longer with us. Well, we were a ragtag bunch because we were all very different. Jerry was life of the party. He was just, well, his smile lit up the room, and he was just funny and fun. And at the same time, he was very serious, depending on what he was doing. Then he went roller skating at Mill Hill one time, and the gal in front of him tripped, and he went to jump over, and he kicked her with his skate and broke her jaw. So he went to visit her in the hospital, and darn if they didn't get married. We were patriotic, we loved America, we loved Cape Cod, we loved the people on Cape Cod because they're friendly people. Whenever we'd get away from Cape Cod, we'd run into the brusque, well, like we'd go to Boston and people were not friendly and warm. And so we appreciated where we were. We appreciated the beauty of the place and the willingness to share among people.
Herring are a vital link in the ecosystem chain, and their safe passage to and from their spawning grounds is critical to their species growth. Amy Croto, Natural Resource Officer, does an educational dive on some herring ladder work this past Wednesday in Marston's Mills and how it will help the small fry headed home to the ocean. Everyone needs a safe passage home. With me today, Amy Croto, Natural Resource Officer, working on the herring runs in the mills.
Yes.
So what happened that they might not have been able to pass through those fish runs?
Right. So over the winter, we had, 5 or so nor'easters, and obviously a lot of trees fell. And while the vast majority of trees that fell in the herring runs were not obstructing any fish passage, and we didn't have any real concerns in the spring when the adults were sort of migrating upstream because they're larger, hardier fish, the fry are emigrating from our ponds, going downstream out into the ocean to spend their first few years of life before they repeat that cycle. And this tree, just upstream of the flume at Middle Pond, had fallen in and left branches sort of in the water column. And part of the tree was dead, part of the tree is still alive, and so we had to work with DPW. Thankfully, they purchased a chainsaw that runs on vegetable oil, so it's more environmentally friendly. And we put a boat in the water, went out yesterday to remove those branches that over time would collect, leaves and would grow algae, effectively creating a net that would catch the fry because they're so small, they're only a couple inches long when they're emigrating. And act as a death trap, essentially.
Wow.
So because we're also herring wardens, aside from being natural resource officers, part of our duty to the state is to ensure safe passage for both the adults and the fry as they're leaving. So we needed to address that in order to continue moving fry downstream safely.
And that's interesting because when you are out there and this tree is down, the tree acts as other things for other species too, doesn't it?
Right. So from a conservation perspective, when you do herring run maintenance, the specific thing to focus on is creating passage for the fish, but doing minimal impact to the remainder of the environment. So pieces of the tree that were still alive, that were outside of the water column, get to stay because they provide habitat for other animals. Pieces of tree that are partially submerged but won't create any obstructions are important as basking areas for other aquatic turtles that we have here in Massachusetts. And that woody debris that sits on the bottom but isn't causing obstructions is important for larval insects, dragonflies, damselflies, mayflies, all different kinds of beetles, all live within that wood and spend a vast majority, some of them their entire lives in that system, also providing food for other species that live within those systems. So it's all important as part of the general ecosystem, even though we focus on the passage for that one well, 2 species.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about herring specifically, because there has been news, obviously, herring trawling. There's been some legislation that's gotten through in the last days or so.
Yep.
Why are they important to the ecosystem?
Right, so they're what we call a keystone species. So their presence is usually an indicator of how environmental conditions are. So a decline in them is often an indicator of poor water quality, or degrading environmental systems. They're also an extremely important food for hosts of animals that after a long winter are looking for, essentially shooting fish in a barrel. And the annual herring run, similar to the locusts every 17 years or so, but this is an annual event, provides food for so many other animals that we have here on Cape Cod. So, and historically they were very important economically, although there's a moratorium on them to be harvested currently recreationally, and there are new restrictions that are coming for the commercial harvest.
Right. So how do people know that these species are degrading in counts and numbers? Is there a system out there that counts these?
Sure. So a lot of our counts are done simply by volunteers. When the fish are running, they go out and they count for 10 minutes and an hour, submit that data, usually through their natural resource office or through their herring warden if they don't have natural resource offices. And then that information is given to the state so they can have a general idea of total population size of a run from year to year. And then they also sometimes have an additional count where the fish are getting to their spawning grounds that would indicate not only the estimate of total size of the run, but the estimate of the number of fish that actually make it to spawning grounds every year, because there is a big difference between those two numbers usually because of predation along the way as they're moving upstream, or if any of them are sick and die, any of those sorts of things will sort of skew the numbers. So they use those numbers over a series, hopefully, of at least 20 years to look at the trends across populations across the entire state.
Wow. How many runs are there in Barnstable?
So we have the Marston's Mills River Run, the Santuit River, which is a shared herring run between Mashpee and Barnstable. We have the West Barnstable Run, which goes from Boat Cove Creek in Barnstable Harbor all the way up into Mill Pond in West Barnstable. Then we have the Centerville River Run, which some of the fish choose to go up the Centerville River and then eventually into Lake Wequaquet. And there's also passage available for them to go into Red Lily Pond and Lake Elizabeth. We also have some what were historic herring runs that are no longer functioning, that we're sort of continuing to look into for rehabilitation purposes, like Lovell's Pond and Little River is one of those.
And we want to make sure that people know that they can't take these herring. It's illegal to do that.
Right, yeah, there's been a moratorium in place, and at this point it was being renewed every 3 years, but in 2014, I think it was, the Atlantic Marine Fisheries Commission put a permanent moratorium on it. So the state and the Marine Fisheries Commission would have to be given a sustainable fisheries management plan for each individual run in order for any runs to be reopened to recreational harvest. It is also important to note, though, that if you are a card-carrying tribal member, you have native rights to those fish, and so they are still allowed to harvest.
Excellent. Well, this was a great education for me, and hopefully, all those little guys get back home.
Yeah, and then hopefully in 3 years or so, we'll see them come back to repeat that process, the circle of life.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Amy.
You're welcome.
Here's a look at the community calendar. On this Saturday, October 6th, from 7 to 9 p.m., join the Mass Audubon Long Pasture Wildlife Sanctuary for autumnal astronomy. With its cool, long nights and the Milky Way arching overhead, autumn is an ideal time to become acquainted with the wonders of the heavens. Weather permitting, you'll observe ghostly nebulas, glittering planets, and the Andromeda Galaxy. Regardless of weather, you'll learn to read star charts and get a handle on what makes for a good, affordable telescope. Dress warmly, in layers, and bring binoculars and a folding chair if you own them. This program takes place rain or shine. There will be plenty to do and learn, even if inclement weather keeps the event indoors. Pre-registration is required and limited. For more information and costs, call 508-362-7475. Reminder, Town Council meets this evening, 7 p.m. in the hearing room on the second floor of Town Hall, or catch it live on Channel 18. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. Email us or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today. Bye.